This could be the single greatest tool invention of the last decade. This might just be what we've all been looking for, the Festool Domino Killer. Let's go. So this is from a company you may know, KREG, who makes pocket hole jigs and router tables and router lifts and track saws and a number of other awesome woodworking tools that we all know and love. Well, mostly love. This is a brand new invention and it's called the MortiseMate. I think it can give some real competition to the Festool Domino with a few drawbacks. If you'd like to check this out or any other tools you see in this video, check the link in the description, the pinned comment, or the shop button right here on YouTube. Now, full disclosure, KREG did send me this for review, but that doesn't mean I don't have problems with it. So, there's that. All right, out of the box, what you get is first on top is the instructions. Hang on to those because we do need to read those apparently. They're just gonna tell you how to set this up, which is very easy. Literally what you get is the MortiseMate itself and the mounting board or the work surface board, and then you get the screws and all to attach it to that board. It's really simple, it only takes a couple of minutes to put together. 4 screws will mount that board to the jig, and then you'll have to mount the handle. The only thing that was a little hard to get that plastic washer to seat onto that bolt because it wasn't sticking through as much as I would like to see here to lock it in. But once you get that figured out, you can tighten that down, then put the other 2 in, and that's going to attach that handle. And this handle is reversible, so if you are left-handed or you would prefer to move that with your right hand versus your left, you can do that here when you're mounting it on. It also comes with 4 screws and pre-drilled holes if you wanted to screw this down to a workbench, or you can clamp it down, which is what I'm gonna do. You also get a 6mm bit, so you can drill those 6mm mortises, or you can pick up the extra bits, which I would highly recommend because you're gonna get an 8 and a 10mm, and depending on what you're building is depending on what size you're gonna use. Of course, the thinner the stock, the thinner the mortise, and thicker the thicker, right? Then you can pick up the loose tenons from KREG. There actually looks like a very similar box to what their pocket screws come in. 25 will come in the 10mm size, 50 in the 8, and 75 in the 6. I'm not sure if they will have more in the future. I'm assuming they might. I would like to see them have bigger packs of these, but this is a good number to get started. I'd pick up a couple packs of each if you plan on doing some joinery. When you set the depth of your bit, they are indicated on there. What you want to do is make half of whatever the length of this tenon is. So for instance, the 6mm is 1.5 inches, you're going to set that at 3/4. Same thing for the 8mm, and then on the 10mm, it is 2 inches long, so you're going to set that at 1 inch. That way you get equal amounts of tenon inside that mortise on each side. The first thing I noticed out of the box is how well this is made. All aluminum construction minus a couple of small pieces like dust collection, the tension handle, and of course the plywood bed. Other than that, everything that moves is metal, which is great. And this drill guide here, what I like that they did is I don't have to switch this drill guide out because they could have done that and made different size bits and you had to switch out drill guides. It would cost more probably. But I am glad that all 3 sizes bits, 6, 8, and 10 all fit inside the same drill guide. The only difference is the size of the cutter head at the end. But everything else is metal. Now, one thing I did notice is after I started using it a while, I had to come back and tighten these 2 screws that operate the slide mechanism. I didn't tighten them down enough to begin with. If I would suggest anything, I would probably suggest putting a little Loctite on the end of those bolts before inserting them. That way everything stays nice and tight. On the right, the set screws are easily accessible. On the left, if you have this set up on the left orientation, it does get a little cumbersome to get in there to that one. Not bad, but it's there. And as far as the spring mechanism works, it plunges every time you move it left to right and you hit that depth stop, everything works well. And you can hear it audibly snap as it steps down that 1/8 inch or so. And then it stops snapping when you get to the end, or to the bottom. To adjust this up and down, this tension, you just loosen this. Then you can slide it up and down to fit the size material that you're going to be working with. All right, so the very first test cut went very well. It was super easy to use. You're literally just moving the arm back and forth, and every time you hit one side or the other, it steps down just a little bit, and that lets it cut that mortise just right. Now, this one's a little loose, as you can see, but there's a lot of times you may want that if you're just using this for alignment or something like that, or you can make it tighter. And the way you make it tighter is with this adjustment screw on either side. You can back off this set screw and then adjust this in or out, so you can make the mortise more narrow or tighter depending on what you want. Once you get it where you want it, you can just adjust that back down. As you can see, as you move this screw, it's moving this little pin in and out, and that's where the positive stop happens. To reset the depth, all you do is push that button on top and it'll pop back out. Now, one thing to note on this thing, it's going to take a little bit of time to dial this in on each side so that you get these mortises just right. Now, this one I was off just a little bit, and I think I know why. Because if you set one side longer than the other, it winds up throwing it off on one of the pieces and you wind up with a kind of an offset. But a lot of times what I do when I do domino joinery is I'll put one side tight, the other side loose, similar to what you see here. I can hammer this tenon in and it's pretty snug in there. And then the other tenon I cut loose so that when you put those together, you can position it exactly where you want it for the glue up. And then once it's glued, it's there. And we get a perfectly flush fit on top. And the faces align perfectly, so it's just a really nice fit. The reason these faces are going to align perfectly every time is because if you use the same top side or the bottom side on this, you're going to get that hole drilled at the exact same spot vertically. Layout on these will be key. You see I got a line drawn down the middle there, across the end grain there, and then you're going to line that up with that line that corresponds on this jig. You line that straight up, you clamp this down. One thing I did find very useful are these Bessie clamps that have maybe a longer reach in there. Now they're made for stuff like that where it reaches in there really so that I can get around there and clamp that piece on. Those work better than just these standard quick clamps. One quick way I've found to set this width on this tenon here is to just lay it on the jig itself and then move that from side to side. You can move those set screws in until you get it to your desired width. Now it could be a little tight, a little loose, however you like it, but you can adjust it easily like that versus trying to guess at it. Always cut a test piece just to make sure after you're done. I was a little bummed. I thought I broke a bit when I was trying to do this miter mortise and tenon, but what happened is it's actually relieving because I literally thought the bit had broke, but it actually just friction fits in there. And so I'm assuming if I stick it in there like that and then tamp it down, we should be back in business. It's kind of different design, but it will pop back in there and you can rock on about your way. Not what I was expecting. I thought they were cut into them, but apparently they just friction fit down in there. So fairly neat. In the kit, you do get the 6mm bit, which I do love because they do have that set collar on there. Very similar to their pocket hole jigs. If you've ever seen those, they have the window that lets you set the depth that you want to use. This is very similar to that. And the 6mm you can set 1/2 or 3/4 or anywhere between. And then as you step up to the 8 and 10mm, you can set up to 1 inch. And what that means, that's the depth you're going to drill your mortise. I would recommend, if you have the budget, to go ahead and get the 8 and the 10. Depending on what you're making, you may need those larger size tenons. I'm having trouble not saying dominoes because they're shaped very similar. I would pick them up just because it's great to have different sizes available depending on what you want. The thicker the material, the bigger the tenon you're going to want to use. Now how this works is it literally just steps down about 1/8 inch every time you go left to right. So once you hit that stop on the end, it releases a mechanism in there that lets you go a little deeper every time, and it looks like about 1/8 inch each pass until you get to the bottom. You don't always feel when you're at the bottom. There's no indicator or anything like that that's going to let you know that. You just go by feel and sound because you can hear a little bit of difference because it's not cutting wood anymore, and you can feel it on the drill slightly. It's a very slight difference. As far as the adjustment up and down, you can adjust on this from 1 3/4 inch all the way up to 1/2 inch, depending on the thickness. That's the thickness of the material you're going to be cutting. I also used it on 1 1/2 inch 2x6, and it worked great. You just drop it down to 1 1/2, lock it in place. There's a knob right here, like a 1/4 turn, and you're just locked in. And then if we want to go back to the 3/4, move it up there, 1/4 turn, you're locked in. For most cases, you don't have to be perfectly in the middle of this cut as far as vertically, because as long as you reference the same side on each piece, whenever you put it together, it's going to line up every time perfectly. And that's where this really shines. Now to set up a real world scenario, I did mill down some maple so that we can show you how this works. This is 3/4 inch thick and it's already planed and all that good stuff. All right, the first scenario is if you're making just a square butt joint like this, you want those to line up perfectly. And that's where the Festool Domino, it shines. Like, it's so great because it's very easy to drill those mortises and then pop that domino in and make everything slide together. This does a very similar thing. Now what you're going to do is after you got it all set up, You're going to set this bed height for the 3/4 inch thickness, and that is indicated on the face of this MortiseMate. The next thing you're going to do is clamp it down. Now, it does have ways to screw this into a workbench. If you have the space or a dedicated area for that, go ahead and do that. It's probably going to be the best way to go, because I did notice that it keeps falling off the bench when I'm trying to clamp it down because of the weight of this aluminum versus the pad here, which is just plywood. Not a huge deal, just something to be aware of. Now, once you get everything clamped down, what you're going to want to do is lay out some lines where you're going to want to drill those mortises on your product. For instance, here we've got just a square end joint. I want to draw a line all the way across both pieces. That's going to make sure I know where we're going to line this up. Now you're going to take this line and set it exactly on this line that's indicated, the vertical line here on the MortiseMate. That's going to let you know you're going to drill right there. Now I did run into an issue here, which we'll talk about in a minute. Once I had both of them drilled, I put these two pieces together and they didn't match. Why did they not match? Well, I drilled them both very tight. In other words, two tight mortises, and this needs to be set up exactly right for that. If you're going to do it that way, both of these set screws on either side have to be exactly in the center. Now there's going to be a few ways you're going to try to do that. One, you can kind of eyeball it with tenons that you can buy, or you can build some type of jig to set this center up every single time. I don't know. This is one of the problems I have with this. We'll talk about it later. Not that it's a bad thing. Just talk about it later. Normally when I make this type of joint, whether I'm making tables or end tables or stuff like that, what I want to do is make one of these mortises really tight so that I have to basically hammer in that tenon so that it's nice and snug. The other one I like to set up loose. This gives me a little bit of play up and down and lets me adjust that so I get these perfectly aligned. I like doing it this way. Some people want tight on both sides. You make your choice. It doesn't matter to me. And once you clamp everything down with glue, it's gonna be there. What's important to note though is it doesn't move up and down, only side to side. So whatever depth or height you set it at rather is where it's going to be on both pieces, and that matters because that's going to make sure both of your pieces, if they're both 3/4 of an inch, will align perfectly on both sides. This is where this thing really shines, much like the Domino. It is an amazing, not only joinery tool, but it's going to make sure everything is nice and flush and just comes out perfect. What if you're making a tabletop, like a panel glue up? Now I've done this with the Domino on a big walnut panel and actually breadboard ends with a panel, and it worked beautifully. This works exactly the same way, but a little different. So how's it exact? Well, it works similar because of the way it's referencing this bed to set the height of that tenon. For instance, these 6 holes that I drilled in these two pieces, when you put them together, they slide together perfectly. Again, I like to leave one side tight, one side loose. That'll let me slip just a little bit side to side. The edge grain we would glue together in this panel so it would always be there. It's never coming apart. But these tenons are the exact same height or distance away from the top, so it's perfectly flat. And that's exactly what you want on a panel glue up. And that's where I think this tool, as well as the Domino, always shines. When you're making panels like tabletops, desktops, even cutting boards to some degree, if you wanted to put dominoes in there for whatever reason, you can align those perfectly, less sanding, more strength in there. It just works. Another application is if you're doing 45-degree miters, or any miter really, and you say you're wanting to make a picture frame or something like that. Just cut 2 45s, and then you're going to draw a line on there across those 2 45s so that you have a reference point for this to line up. You're going to line that up again with that vertical line and then drill your mortises. Now this is where I thought I broke a bit, but I didn't, but I sure thought I did. I just switched to the 8mm bit and then drilled the mortise out, and it worked perfect. As you can see here, it lines up exactly perfectly. A little snug, which I don't terribly mind here, and both faces here are also perfectly flat. The angle is also perfectly aligned at the top and the bottom. It's just a good all-around fit. So if you're building picture frames or any square frame really, this is where it's going to give a lot of strength in that miter. As far as dust collection goes, it works really good, much like the Domino. The Domino has 0 dust. This may have 1 or 2% dust. It works extremely well when you have it hooked up. The only thing is, like my Festool dust extractor won't hook up to this. A standard shop vac hose will fit right into that adapter, or over that adapter rather, with a little bit extra room there. So if you do have a regular shop vac, that'll work. If you do have a dust extractor, I got this Rockler dust hose kit that has a lot of different adapters, and it works perfect. Now before we get to a couple of things I don't care for about this new MortiseMate, it's an amazing tool. but there's a couple things I would improve if I could. We'll put it like that. Let's talk about the Festool Domino. This has been the king of joinery, fast joinery anyway, and one of the most controversial tools you could talk about because of the price. $1,200, and that doesn't even include the tenons. So we're talking 4 times the price of this MortiseMate that you can do basically the same thing. Well, almost. There's a couple of things that this will allow you to do. First, you can take this easily to your work. So if I'm building a tabletop, I can take this wherever I need it to, especially on long, thick boards, right? Because if you're using this, you're gonna have to lay the big board on top of this and move it down. You'll have to shim it up on each side with some extra plywood. 3/4 inch plywood is what this is. So you lay the pieces out so everything stays nice and flat. It just introduces a little bit extra work. Not that that's bad, because you are saving 4 times the price, or at least 3 times the price, $900. Another thing where this shines is we can do angles with this. Because it has this fence that you can adjust to basically any angle between 90 and 0. So if you have 2 long 45-degree angles that you need to join together, this is where this is going to shine. And this doesn't have that option. You can't do angles on there, which I find odd, because this is kind of an upgrade or an iteration on Jessam's Pocket Mill Pro, and they have a way, if you buy the right stuff, to do angles. And I wonder if KREG won't come out with something like that in the future. There's also a bunch of accessories and things you can buy with the Domino, but that doesn't really matter here, because I think if you're looking at this, you're not necessarily wanting to buy a Domino because of a few reasons. Number 1, you don't like Festool. Number 2, it's too expensive for what you're doing to justify that cost, because it's not just $1,200, it's also another $300-ish for extra bits, size bits, as well as some tenons and things like that. That's why I think this could be a Festool killer for a lot of people, because it does accomplish very similar tasks to the Festool Domino. If you're comparing the same sizes, the Dominoes are slightly longer, just barely, and then the only other difference I can tell, other than the design of them or the markings on the top, is the edges on the Dominoes are a little bit pointy, almost like somebody pinched it to that edge, and the KREG tenons are rounded. Other than that, they'll fit in the same holes and work the same way. So if you have a Festool Domino and you want to save some money on tenons. Really my 2 main complaints, and they're very nitpicky complaints here. Not even, I mean, it's just something to be aware of. I wish that in some way, when we're adjusting the left to right, that we could adjust them both in at the exact same time, out at the same time, so that it remains at the exact center line of that marker there. Because if I adjust the right side all the way in, the left side all the way out, it skews that hole on the center line, right? And so if we could adjust both of those in and out at the same time, that would be amazing. I would love that. And then the second minor nitpick is this Allen wrench you have to keep up with to adjust those set screws, as well as the set screw on your drill bits. I wish there was a better way to keep up with this, because we all know this is gonna get lost and then we're gonna be searching for it. Not a huge deal, but I would like to see. All they would have to do literally is cut out something in this plywood where it would set inside there and embed a magnet underneath it or down inside there, and then it would literally just stick right there and we could keep up with it. Something simple like that would be great. And as stated earlier, one thing I would suggest you buy is a good clamp. I like this one only because it has a deeper reach and it works really well with this KREG, and this is the Bessie GK30. I'll link to it in the description. It's a gear clamp, and it clamps down really tight without damaging the wood, and it reaches in and grabs a hold of that, where the workpiece is over across onto this bed. It just works. It just works. That's what I'm saying. It works. Now there's one other Festool Domino killer that I'll show you, but I probably shouldn't. I bought this myself and used it, and it scared me. Only because of how close your hand is to that spinning bit. And I bought this on eBay. I don't even know if it's still available, but if it is, I'll link it in the description. But it does a similar job to the Domino, although different and more scarier. I don't even know the name of this thing. But you just use a standard router. So if you have a palm router or anything like that, it'll work with that. If you want a more motorized version. But I think this is a much better option than even that. Because of how this works, it's safer, in my opinion, and it just works well. I have no inside information on this, but I do foresee KREG coming out with maybe some attachments or things that can really level this up even more, like the angle attachment or something like that. I would love to see that from KREG. I think they did a fantastic job. This was the first one out of the gate, so I think this is a great addition to your shop if you're looking to upgrade your joinery. this is the way to go, minus the domino. I think this is one of the best tools that's come out in recent memory because of what it does. It allows Festool Domino-like joinery at an affordable price, because any jig in this that does this similar thing costs a lot of money. And this, I think, at this price is a very good value if you do a lot of joinery, or you just want to step up your joinery from something other than pocket holes. This might be a great option for you. It's going to be a very clean look, very professional look, and I think it will last for years and years to come because it is really well made. You should check it out. Link in the description and the pinned comment, as well as the view products button here on YouTube. Go check this out, seriously. Do you even need a Festool Domino now that KREG slayed the beast? Let me know. If you like this video, you'll love that one. Click that box, get you the big old virtual fist bump. Seriously, go check it out. I really appreciate it. Oh, subscribe. That helps a lot.